Welcome to the Identity Specialist podcast, where we explore how identity shapes every part of our life. My name is Dr. Lem Usita, and I help individuals and organizations navigate identity formation in a world that's constantly evolving. So if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell because we go deep into the conversations that matter. So we're going to talk today about the masculinity crisis. Is it fact or fiction? There's this growing debate happening right now. People are saying that masculinity is in decline, that men are lost, that traditional male roles are vanishing, and as a result, we're seeing increased rates of anxiety, depression, and a lack of direction in many men today. But here's the real question. Is masculinity in real decline, or is it evolving? And if it's evolving, what does that mean for men? More importantly, how can identity formation be the key to develop a stronger and more purposeful masculinity? That's what we're talking about today. So the first thing we're going to look at is whether identity formation is dynamic or is it static? And the main idea is that identity is an ongoing process. The first thing we need to understand is that identity formation isn't a one-time event. It's a dynamic process that evolves over a lifetime. And historically, masculinity was framed around a fixed set of traits: dominance, stoicism, being a provider. But today, the world is different. Expectations have shifted, roles have expanded, and that leaves many men wondering, where do I fit? Now, Eric Erickson's psychosocial development theory states that identity is shaped over time through life experiences. So masculinity, like identity, it isn't static. It adapts based on social, cultural, and personal development. Studies from the American Psychological Association show that rigid gender roles contribute to mental health struggles in men. However, flexibility in masculine identity leads to greater resilience and fulfillment. So your identity as a man is not something you inherit. It's something that you build for the rest of your life. The strongest men are the ones who understand that growth and adaptations are not signs of weakness, but signs of wisdom. Now we take a look at James Marcia's identity statuses and masculinity. And we take a look at how masculinity must be explored and defined personally. So to understand how men can develop a stronger sense of masculinity, let's look at psychologist James Marcia's identity statuses. It's a framework that helps explain how identity is formed. Basically, the status takes a look at a balance of exploration and commitment. So the four identity statuses applied to masculinity look like this. The diffuse status means that there's no exploration or no commitment. The example of that is a man who feels completely lost and unsure of his place. Foreclosure is that status where there is commitment but no exploration. Example of this is a man who accepts societal masculinity norms without questioning if they align with his values. Moratorium is a status where there's exploration without commitment. An example of this is a man questioning traditional masculinity but unsure of what he truly believes. Then identity achievement, or the achievement status, is the status where there's commitment after exploration. The example is a man who has actively shaped and owned his masculinity in a way that aligns with his core values. So research from identity development psychology suggests that men who actively explore and define their masculinity experience higher self-confidence, better emotional intelligence, and improved mental health. Studies in positive psychology show that men who shape their own sense of masculinity rather than just following cultural expectations are happier and more fulfilled. If you feel uncertain about masculinity, that's not a failure, it's an invitation. The best version of masculinity is one that is examined, tested, and chosen rather than simply adopted by default. So when we take a look at masculinity as a construct and not a constraint, we're able to redefine masculinity and strengthen it. One of the biggest misconceptions is that masculinity is something fixed and that any change is a threat. But here's the truth. Masculinity was never meant to be a rigid box. The moment you treat it like one, any deviation feels like a crisis. But when we see masculinity as a construct and not a constraint, we realize we have the power to shape it rather than be trapped by it. In history, masculinity has taken on many forms. From warriors and hunters to scholars and artists, masculinity has never been a one size fits all concept. Studies in gender role adaptability show that men who integrate traits like emotional intelligence, adaptability, and self awareness experience greater success in leadership, relationships, and personal growth. So masculinity isn't dying, it's evolving. And the strongest men aren't those who resist change, but those who define masculinity for themselves while embracing core values of strength, integrity, and leadership. Now, when we take a look at the power of narrative identity to tell your own story, men can create their own masculine narratives. Psychologist Dan McAdams introduced the idea of narrative identity, which says that we understand who we are through the stories we tell about ourselves. This means that men who feel lost today need to start telling a new story about masculinity. Now, neuroscience research shows that the brain responds to self narrative as if it were reality, meaning that the way men perceive their masculinity directly influences their confidence, their leadership, and their decision making. So if you don't write your own story or if you don't tell your own story, someone else is going to write it for you. The men who thrive are the ones who take ownership of their masculinity and define it on their own terms. Now we'll take a look at the importance of mentorship and purpose driven masculinity. Only in this context can men thrive when they have mentorship and purpose. One of the biggest reasons men struggle with masculinity today is the lack of mentorship. Historically, masculinity was passed down through strong male mentors, fathers, uncles, elders. But today, many men are figuring it out alone. The fathers are absent. The uncles may be around, but we definitely don't have elders any longer. Sociological studies show that young men who have strong male mentors report higher confidence, higher self discipline, and higher emotional resilience. Purpose driven masculinity leads to lower rates of depression, stronger relationships, and increased leadership potential. So, masculinity isn't something you figure out alone. The most successful men seek mentorship, they learn from others, and then mentor the next generation. So if you're struggling with what masculinity means to you, don't just sit in confusion. Engage in identity formation. And if you want personalized guidance on this journey, that's what I do at Identity Specialist. We help individuals and organizations navigate identity formation in a way that is empowering and actionable. So book a session at Identity Specialist and then subscribe and comment how you see masculinity evolving today. So thanks for watching. Keep growing, keep questioning, and remember, identity isn't given to you, it's built. So see you next time. Don't forget, be unique, but belong.